In November of 1944, Adolf Hitler gave Heinrich Himmler an army to hold. Not a police force. Not the camps. A real command in the field. Tanks, guns, and 40,000 men dug in on the wrong side of the Rhine. Himmler had never led soldiers in battle. He never would learn how. And by the time the trap shut on those men in the snow outside a French town called Colmar, Himmler was already gone. He had slipped east to lose a bigger army somewhere else. The men he left behind were surrounded and ground down and marched into the cages. The Allies counted them one by one. 16,438 prisoners. This is how that army died. And how the man told to save it saved only himself. For 3 months, the Germans clung to a bulge on the French side of the Rhine. It sat in central Alsace in eastern France. Rough 40 miles long. 30 miles deep. Curled around an old wine town called Colmar. The Allies gave it a name that stuck. The Colmar Pocket. Inside it sat the German 19th Army. One field army penned against a river it could not cross fast enough. By the end of this, you will know why Berlin held ground it could never keep. Ordered it defended to the last man. And what that order cost. The short version is plain. A whole army went in. One outfit came out whole. The rest went into the snow or into the cages. The ground made the pocket. In the autumn of 1944, the American General Jacob Devers drove his armies up through southern France into Alsace. He freed the north of the region. He freed the south. He reached the Rhine above the pocket and below it. But in the middle, around Colmar, the front just stopped. The Germans still held a foothold on the French bank. 2 crossings fed it. One at Breisach, one at Chalampé. Those 2 bridges were the whole lifeline. Everything the 19th Army ate and burned and fired came across them. And everything that lived to get out would have to go back across them too. One man commanded inside the pocket. General Siegfried Rasp. A career infantry officer born in Munich. He took the 19th Army in December of 1944. He walked into a job already close to hopeless. On paper, his army looked strong. 8 divisions and a panzer brigade. On the ground, it was thinner than that. Every unit was under strength. Some men were veterans of the first year of the war. Others had been pulled from depots days before, handed a rifle and told to hold French soil like it was German. That idea was not Rasp's. It came from the top. Hitler had ruled that Alsace and Lorraine were German land. Annexed. To be held like any acre inside the old borders. In late November, he ordered the 19th Army into what the German records themselves called a do-or-die defence of the ground around Colmar. There was no sense in it. The pocket made nothing. It threatened nothing. It could be fed only across a river, over a handful of bridges, under Allied guns. It was held for one reason. A man in Berlin would not give up a symbol. To run the defence of the Upper Rhine, Hitler reached for the strangest man he had. He built a fresh command. He called it Army Group Upper Rhine, and he handed it to Heinrich Himmler. Himmler ran the SS. He ran the camps. Across occupied Europe, he ran the machinery of terror. What he had never done was lead soldiers in a fight. This was his first field command. He answered to Hitler alone. No army staff stood over him to catch what he got wrong. The mistakes came fast. On the 1st of January 1945, the German High Command threw one more punch in Alsace. They called it Operation North Wind. Part of it drove north out of the Colmar pocket, the 19th Army pushing up toward the American line near Strasbourg. The plan wanted speed. It wanted to link hands with German forces coming down from the Saar. Himmler's men gave it none of that. They were slow into place. When they finally struck, they gained almost nothing. The attack burned fuel and men the pocket could not spare. It ended with the Germans back where they started, only weaker. Push set off a panic on the Allied side. And the panic shows what the ground was really worth. The German drive reached towards Strasbourg, the great Alsatian city freed only a month before. Eisenhower looked at thin lines and killing cold. He gave the sound order: pull the American 7th Army back to the Vosges Mountains. Give Strasbourg up rather than be trapped inside it. To the French, that was unthinkable. Strasbourg had been a wound since the Germans seized it in the War of 1870. General de Gaulle warned Eisenhower to his face. Even a brief loss of the city might break the spirit of the nation. It might touch off revolt at home. The French army would defend Strasbourg with the Americans or without them. Eisenhower backed down. He tore up the order. He handed the job to the French First Army. That same French First Army would close the trap on the Germans 3 weeks later. The Allies came for the pocket in earnest now. The work fell to that French First Army under General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny. And be clear about this. The story is usually told as an American one. It was not. Breaking the Colmar pocket was mostly a French win. De Lattre drew up a pincer, one arm from the north near Turkheim, one arm from the south out of Mulhouse. The two would meet at the Rhine. They would split the pocket in half. They would pin the 19th Army against water it could not cross in time. The blow fell on the 20th of January. It fell into the worst winter Alsace could remember. De Lattre had one word for it in his own account. He called it Siberian. The cold dropped to 4 degrees below zero. A hard wind cut across the flat plain. More than 3 feet of snow lay over everything. More kept falling. Rivers and canals froze solid. The ground was too hard to dig. Gunners could not see through the blowing white to aim. low cloud pinned much of the Allied air support to the ground. The cold hurt both sides, but the Germans fought from built shelters. The French had to cross open frozen fields to reach them. Much of that French army was not French the way the name sounds. It had been rebuilt around colonial troops raised in North Africa. The 2nd Moroccan Infantry Division came out of the Atlas country. The 4th Moroccan Mountain Division came off the high ground. The 9th Colonial Infantry Division stood beside them. Tens of thousands of Moroccan and other North African men, many of them mountain-born, sent across a frozen European plain to break a German army. The 4th Moroccan pushed up the southern road. Rouffach and the Cernay, through Salts. They fought through snow to their thighs. Their rations froze into stone. The oil in their weapons thickened and cracked. Still, they came on, village by village, into machine guns dug behind stone walls. By the end of the first week, de Latre's attack was in trouble. His colonial troops had bled for a few miles of frozen ground. Then they stalled against hard German resistance. The French were worn thin. They were still short of men after the December fighting, and the cold was killing as fast as the enemy. So Devers sent American weight to help. The American 21st Corps came into the line under French command. It brought veteran outfits. The 3rd Infantry Division. The 28th. The 28th carried a grim nickname from the Hurtgen Forest the autumn before. The Bloody Bucket. Tired men thrown into fresh snow to add the mass the French pincer needed. That American weight brought a second wind. It also brought some of the ugliest fighting of the whole campaign. It was house to house, through frozen towns the Germans had turned into forts. The worst of it came at a small village called Jebsheim, on the canals near the Ill River. The Germans had woven their defence through the houses and along the water. The 136th Mountain Infantry Regiment held it. The American 254th Infantry went in first. Guns from 4 battalions opened the way before 3 in the morning. It was not enough. The first assault was thrown back. Men could not fire. Their hands and their weapons had frozen together. It took 3 days to take Jebsheim. It took American infantry. It took French tanks of the 5th Armoured Division. It took a company of French paratroopers. The Germans struck back in a desperate counter, 7 Jagdpanther tank hunters led by an officer named Plenge. Clearing that one village cost hundreds of dead on both sides. And it was one village among many, in a pocket 40 miles across. It was in that American stretch, near a village called Holtzwihr, that the battle gave up its most famous moment. A young lieutenant named Audie Murphy held a thinned-out line of the 3rd Infantry Division. 6 German tanks and a body of infantry came at him across the snow. Murphy sent his men back into the tree line. He stayed forward alone with a field telephone. He called artillery down on the advancing Germans. Then he climbed onto a burning American tank destroyer. An M10 already hit, smoking under his boots. he turned its 50 caliber machine gun on the German infantry. He held there for close to an hour. The machine burned beneath him. He worked the gun with one hand. He called in shell fire with the other. His citation credits him with breaking the attack and cutting down some 50 of the enemy before he pulled back. The Medal of Honor citation said it plainly. For an hour, the Germans tried every available weapon to eliminate Lieutenant Murphy, but he continued to hold his position. He got the Medal of Honor for that hour. He ended the war, the most decorated American soldier of it. But here is the point. His stand was one hinge of the trap swinging shut on the 19th Army from the north. Through the last days of January, the pocket shrank from both ends. The Germans were pressed back toward the river. They lost ground they could not retake. They lost men they could not replace. The cold did its own work. Frostbite filled the aid stations on both sides. Half-frozen men held lines they knew were doomed. They waited on an order to fall back that Berlin would not send. Engines would not turn over. The Germans burned their last fuel to keep a few tanks moving. Every gallon spent was a gallon gone for good. This was the slow arithmetic strangling the 19th Army from the first day. A foothold is only as strong as the crossings that feed it. This one fed through two. Both sat under Allied guns the moment the sky cleared. Every shell and ration and replacement had to run that gauntlet. So did every wounded man going the other way. As the pocket tightened, both bridges carried a whole army's traffic squeezed into a shrinking box. The men on the rim thinned out for want of everything. There were no reserves to plug a brake. No room to hold them. No fuel to move them if there had been. An army that cannot be fed and cannot move is not defending a line. It is waiting to be counted. Then the anchor came out of the German line. In the dark of February 1st, a French column under General Schlesser drove straight into Colmar. The town that gave the pocket its name fell the next day. For its people, it ended more than 4 years of German rule. For the 19th Army, it was the loss of the centre of its front. The blow that cut the pocket in two came from the American armour. The 12th Armoured Division pushed south through the lines of the 28th. It drove for the seam between the German north and the German south. Its lead tanks rolled into the town of Rouffach on the 5th of February. There they shook hands with the 4th Moroccan coming up from the south. The northern arm and the southern arm had met. About 17 days after the offensive began, the Colmar pocket was split down the middle. The German north was cut off from the German south. Both halves stood pinned against a river with 2 bridges behind them. For Rasp, the question was no longer whether he could hold. It was whether he could get anyone out. And here Hitler's do-or-die order became a trap of its own. The defence had come from Berlin, so the leave to quit it came late. Only on the 8th of February did Hitler let the pocket be given up. By then the crossings were under fire. The roads to them were choked with snow and wreckage. Rasp began pulling his rear guard back toward the last bridge, still in German hands. that was Schlampe in the south. The last act played out at that bridge on the 9th of February. The German rear guard held the road open for the last men trying to reach the far bank. Then it was overrun. The 19th Army blew the Rhine bridge behind it to keep the Allies from following. That same day, de Lattre declared the Battle of the Colmar pocket over. The bulge held for 3 months was gone. 21 days of fighting once the final push began. While all this happened, the general meant to command the whole Rhine front had already walked away. In late January, his command was reorganized under a real soldier, Paul Hauser. Days later, Himmler's own command was shut down for good. He had held the top job on the Rhine for 2 months. He had nothing to show for it. A failed offensive and a shrinking pocket. He did not stay for the end. Hitler, of all things, handed him another army group in the east, facing the Red Army. So while the trap was still closing at Colmar, the man who had commanded its defence packed and left for a fresh disaster hundreds of miles off. The 19th Army stayed. It had no train east to catch. Then came the bill. The Allies counted 16,438 German prisoners in the Colmar area. On top of that, more than 20,000 of the 19th Army's men had fallen inside the pocket. Some counts of its whole loss run higher still, toward 38,000 once every column is added. When the guns stopped, the Germans had left 55 armoured vehicles and 66 guns in the snow. There was no way across the river for them. An army of 8 divisions and a panzer brigade had come apart. Of all of it, only one outfit, the 708th People's Grenadier Division, is recorded crossing the Rhine in anything like one piece. The rest had to be built again from nothing in Baden, on the German bank. It was built from old men and home guard boys. The last manpower the Reich had left. As a force of real soldiers, the 19th Army was gone. What that ruin bought was the last German foothold on the French bank of the Rhine in the south. For 3 months, that bulge had forced the Allies to tie down whole outfits, just to watch a foothold instead of crossing the river themselves. Pocket had been a gateway over the Rhine. As long as the Germans held it, they held an open door back into the west. With it gone, the Allied line in the south straightened out. The last enemy west of the river in that stretch was cleared. The men who had spent the winter grinding down the pocket were free now. Free to turn east and treat the Rhine as a wall to climb. The 19th Army had bought Berlin nothing, and it had spent itself doing it. The win was not cheap for the men who took it. The Colmar fighting cost the Allies around 21,000 casualties. Near 13,000 French. About 8,000 American. Most of them paid in that Siberian cold. The Moroccan troops who opened the attack were among the hardest hit. They had crossed a frozen plain and broken a dug-in army in weather that killed men who never saw a German. And the ground they died for had never been Germany's to keep. Alsace was French. The people of Colmar poured into the streets when de Lattre's colonial soldiers came in out of the snow. The 40 miles of the pocket had been held on the word of one man in Berlin. He called the ground German. he would spend a whole army to prove it. It was a cruel and pointless order. The men freezing in the pocket paid it. And the man Hitler first set over them understood none of the soldiering it took. Himmler botched the one attack he ordered. He was relieved before the trap even shut. Then he was sent east to lose a larger command. He never had to stand at the Schlampe Bridge and watch what was left of the 19th Army try to cross. The general who did stand there, Siegfried Rasp, got a fraction of his men over the water. Then he blew the bridge behind them. The shape of it was plain. An army placed on the wrong side of a river and told not to move. A police chief sat above it as overlord, who then excused himself. And when the French First Army, its Moroccan troops and its American armour squeezed the pocket flat, the men left inside walked into the cages. For a piece of France that was never going to be German. Himmler already had a new army to lose. Army Group Vistula flung against the Red Army in Pomerania. By the end of March, they would strip him of that command too. A failed field general twice over in a single winter. The men he left in the snow at Colmar got no second chance. There was only the one river at their backs, the two bridges, and the count at the cages. 16,000